People of Reddit who have encountered ghosts or other supernatural beings. What was your experience like? What happened? I was in a motorcycle accident a few months back. I broke my spine and needed surgery to fuse several vertebrae. As they brought me into the surgery, I noticed two men standing in the corner of the OR looking not at all surgically clean and entirely out of place. Looking back at it, I later recognized them as my two late grandfathers. One of Horn died in the hospital. The other died during a surgery. The reason I know that was my grandfathers because my parents told me a story about how they were in the hospital's food court during my 11-hour surgery. And my dad heard his father telling him that everything was going to turn out all right. He told my mom, and she wasn't at all surprised, because she had heard her father tell her that I was going to be fine, even though this was late, and they were the only ones in this dead silent cafeteria. I've never told that story before, let alone to the entire world. I lived in this house with a basement, and every time I walked up the stairs I would get this weird creepy goosebumps feeling on the back of my neck. It didn't make me uneasy to go down the stairs or to be in the basement. My craft room was down there and spent a lot of time there. After a while I would have items I was using disappear when I would look away from them. I would search and one day I got frustrated and to no one in particular I said, "Earl, can I please have my scissors back?" I had just looked under the pile new mail and when I turned my head, there were my scissors on top of the pile of rail. I talked to my neighbor and she told me that the original owner of the house was a jolly old man who loved to prank people, and that he had fell coming up the stairs one day and died. I think the goosebumps were him trying to tell me to be careful, and every time after that, when something would disappear, I would politely ask for it back and it would appear in a place that I could not have missed it before. Thanks, old man. It was fun. My grandparents used to have a really beautiful painting of my aunt hanging in their living room. And yes, she is still alive. Anyways, when I was about 5 or 6 I was sleeping in their living room one night when I heard it talking to me. It was her voice and it talked to me just like she would have. It was weird because I was really calm and not scared, even talking back, but I knew that paintings don't talk. Eventually she told me to go wake up my grandpa and tell him she wants to talk to him. I went and woke him up, and when he realized I was talking about the painting he got really pissed. He was yelling at me when he suddenly stopped and stared out the window. Then his eyes got wide and he told me to hide in his bedroom and tell my grandma to call the police. He then grabbed a pistol he had hidden in his cabinet and ran outside. While she was on the phone we heard 2 shots. He came back in after a few minutes and told us he shot one of the guys trying to break into his house in the arm, but they all got away. It turns out that a prison for minors about 20 miles away had 3 escapees. They ran through the woods until they came to my grandpa's property and planned on looting what they could and use us as hostages if necessary. That is until my aunt's painting woke me up and told me to wake him up. I was woken up one night by my grandmother standing next to my bed. It was odd because she lived in a nursing home, but for some reason it felt totally normal to see her standing there. I remember looking up at her and feeling very calm and at peace. Nothing was said. We just looked at each other for what felt like a minute or 2, and then I put my head back down and went back to sleep. I found out the next morning that she had died. That night, my brother said he also saw her that night standing by his bed in a long blue nightgown. She was wearing the same thing when I saw her and so happened to be wearing a long blue nightgown when she died. I tell this same story every time the question is asked. So here goes. Woke up to get a glass of water at night. Passed my dad on the way to the kitchen. I asked him something. About where was he going. He walked right past me. Like he didn't see or even hear me. Just was in a type of trance. And he walked out the front door. I looked out the front window. And he was sitting on our sidewalk. Under a tree. Hands on his knees staring into the dark. I went to my mom's room to ask her what Dad was doing. She said, "What do you mean? He's right here?" She scooted over. As there was my dad. Laying in bed. Asleep. I was hanging out at my friend's house with her boyfriend. We were watching TV. And she had some unlit tea lights on the top of it. An old CRT tie. All of a sudden 2 of the tea lights fly off the top and slam into opposite walls. She got up and said, "That's been happening a lot lately." Our last house had a ghost cat in it. We have 2 live cats. A black one who is old and can't jump on anything higher than the couch. And a crazy white cat. I'd often be working around the house and see our black cat at my feet. Reach down to pet him and he wasn't there. After a quick search I'd find him in an entirely different part of the house having a snooze. For the longest time, I just assumed it was my eyes playing tricks on me. Then one time I was at the kitchen sink, doing dishes, and in my peripheral vision, I see our black cat jump up onto the counter beside me. I even heard the muffled thump when he landed on the countertop and felt a bump on my arm as he headbutted me. He hadn't been able to jump that high in a couple years, so of course I turned to fully look at him and nothing. No cat. Empty counter. This wasn't the first experience my daughter and I had, but I think it's the most interesting. When my daughter was around 2, she asked me one night, "Why do they come into my room at night?" I asked her who she was talking about and she said, "The stars. They come in and play with my toys." I told her as long as they didn't hurt her or break anything, they were welcome to come play. A few nights later, shortly after I got in bed, I heard footsteps run down the hall, into my room, and around to my side of the bed. I rolled over, expecting to see my daughter, but nothing was there. We also heard voices here and there, but there was nothing malicious, so we just let it be. We used to have a big German Shepherd. We also had a Rottweiler and a Great Dane at the same time. While the Shepherd was not the alpha, as far as being protector of the house, he took the lead. We had to put him down when he was about 11. A few weeks later, I was in bed and swore I heard him sitting next to me, panting. This happened several times over the next couple of months. One night, my wife and I were in bed and I heard it again. My wife sat up and said, "Do you hear it?" Quote, "The panting?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "I've been hearing it for weeks." She sat on the edge of the bed and called the ghost dog over. She explained that we still had our 2 other big dogs and that they could protect us, so he didn't have to do it anymore. Never heard it again. Was going for a job interview as a waitress at a biker bar. I didn't want to, but I really needed the money. As I was getting dressed, the closet door starts repeatedly opening and slamming shut. I was so dumbfounded that I just sat down on the bed and decicaled not to go. I put it down to my grandmother who died about 3 months before. Ever since, I heard lots of cracking noises and footsteps in my apartment. It turns out that my brother forged my grandmother's will. She had left me everything and she was very well off. In Ontario, Canada, if there is only one beneficiary, there is no public opening of the will or any record of it. Afterwards, he confessed to a friend of his, who later told me, after he died, My grandmother was probably pissed that I was putting myself in danger for money. But I was supposed to be well off because of the inheritance I didn't get. On the night my grandma died suddenly, all the grandchildren smelled her perfume and felt like someone was hugging there. We were all at our own house and all had this happen around 3 in the morning. I'm happy my introduction to the paranormal was friendly. I've had 2 very unrelated experiences that I can't explain. I don't want to jump to the conclusion that it was a haunting, as I'm pretty skeptical of those things. I've simply had 2 experiences that I can't explain. 1. I was about 13 or 14 in my parents' basement, just passing the time waiting for my mom to bring me to hockey practice. I was in the house alone, sprawled out on a couch, listening to a Discman. Yes, iron old. Our house had a storage room in the basement, and I was laying across from the door. Now, since I was a kid, I remember the door handle of this room would always jiggle. It used to scare the shit out of friends sleeping over, like someone was inside, halfway turning the knob type thing. I always attributed it to the fact that the furnace was in this room, and so there must be some sort of draft. Anyways, on this particular day I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I turn around, and the door was wide open. It has been closed, and then it abruptly closed as soon as I turned my head. Like something or someone opened it to take a look, and then got spooked that I saw it. I immediately jumped up, left the house. I just can't explain how a door opened like that. And then the moment I looked at it, it kind of slammed shut. 2. Fast forward to this October. I met a mutual friend in East Glacier, Montana of all places. I won't go on about the circumstances, but we were thinking of dating and live a long ways away from each other. So, met around halfway for a weekend. We got wasted at this local dive bar, and this really nice guy offered us a place to stay for free. He set us up with a room, fed us liquor. We sleep. In the morning, her and I were talking and the room doorknob made a sound. We look over. It twisted fully. The room door opened, and nothing was there. I thought I was imagining things, but the girl I was with was scared stiff and we left. I later got the guy's number and texted him about it. He said something along the lines of, "Oh, don't worry, that's just Margaret." Both stories were from my morn. She said that when she was little living in China, it was at night and everyone was asleep. Little did they know that something happened. I think a candle caught fire to the drapes or something. Either way, a fire started in her room with her sister as they were sleeping. My grandma, was in another room. Apparently my mom's grandma, my great-grandma, came to my grandma in a dream and told her to wake up because there is danger. My grandma woke up and went to my mom's room where she caught the fire before it spread beyond the desk and saved my mom and aunt. Another time, my mom was with her great-aunt. Her great-aunt was having a hard time sleeping lately. So, one night, as they were out walking about, my mom said her great-aunt looked into the sky and saw a parade or Chinese deities across the sky in a sort of procession. 4 days later, her great-aunt passed away. I was living in an inner-city area in the eastern U.S. The city I lived in had major issues, but the house I lived in was great, until weird things started happening. One morning one of my roommates came to me and was obviously freaked out. He had fallen asleep in the living room the night before and woke up at 3 a.m. and he could hear these creepy bells. But as he walked around to try and find the source of the bells, it seemed to be coming from not just one place but all around. I told this to another roommate and he immediately went white. He had experienced the same thing but didn't tell anyone as he had been drinking. I decided to stay up to see if I could figure it out, and I around 3 a.m. heard the really creepy bells. But they seemed to be coming from the basement. This basement, at the best of times, gave me a bad feeling, and there was no way I was going down there at 3 a.m. I'm kind of ashamed that I ran upstairs and hid in my bed. One night I had a dream my grandpa was talking to me like we were having a normal conversation, and he said he was leaving. I woke up and my mom told me he died the day before. That was weird, and everybody thinks I am making it up, but it happened.